was not going to be acceptable to the company. And so that one has come off the list. And unfortunately, many of you, that was a popular one. And for that project, we had to scrub it. And then Ron, are you on? I think Ron was looking for, the login, okay. Hold on, I'm going to send it to him real quick. Ron indicated that the project he had, which also was very popular with many of you, indicated that one also was going to be a no-go. So unfortunately, probably the two most popular projects we had were not going to be in the mix anymore. And I'm going to reply to Ron real quick. Hold on, and I'll get back to you. And so what I would like to do briefly is I'll talk to you about the nominations and where I think we are with the projects. What I've done basically is take your first, second, and third choices and took a look at the nominated project and basically took the ones off the options, which had either no interest or low interest at 3, or the individual that was sponsoring it didn't have a lot of desire to. It was rated like number 3 in their desire to move forward. And so what it comes out to be is that the ones in pink. Let me see. On your side, you should be seeing hopefully the Excel sheet. And these are the projects that we had over here to the left. You may not be able to see all of it. And the nominations in here. So what we have currently from the nominations of the project, the first one that we had, which is in pink up here, which is really the first and second choice of these students, is not going to be viable. And then Matthews, which was the lab, also we had several first and second choices on that. So that one in pink as well has come off. What it looks like we have basically is that Cameron and Edgar, your project here, and Judith had that as a second choice. This is a real strong possibility for a team in working with UTC in their project. And again, we're looking for at least 3 members at this point, or 4. We can go down to 2, but basically sometimes 3 and 4 works out a little bit better. So we have 2 potential candidates here, and then Dave, and your project was also popular with a lot of the students, and looks like we have Dave, Larry, and Ron are very interested in that. And Jay also is interested up there as a choice. However, we also had a lot of students also interested in working with Jay on the Air Force project. And I put Megan and Matthew. You had indicated actually another project that Jay had nominated, but there was no one. Jay wasn't one of Jay's first or second choices, or third even. And so I just wanted to see if you might be interested in working on an Air Force project, Matthew and Megan, along with Jay, if that works. So these are really kind of the 3 that we have potentially that looks like of the nominations right now is Dave. We have a team with him, Larry, and Ron, Cameron, Edgar, and perhaps Judith. And then a third team if this will work, is Megan, Matthew, and Jay. So what we need to do is we're going to have another round, basically, of going through this and taking a look at other potential nominations. We can probably add a fourth member onto these three-member teams that we have currently. To each one of these are three. It's possible we could add four, but we still, at this point, would probably do better if we would have at least one more project that we could nominate and then get students in there. So let me stop here and let's maybe have some discussion about this and what you thought about since we had our last session. Because what I did since we met on Wednesday, some students provided additional feedback, projects, added that into the mix, provided the Excel sheet, which had comments about what I thought were good projects from the NGS standpoint, and provided that back to you. I think it was on Sunday I sent that out. And in there, Megan had another nomination that wasn't in there before. Matthew had indicated the issues that he had, and so this was where we stand. So, what questions do you have, and comments about the projects? And has anybody, it's most importantly, determined perhaps another project that may be interested, that maybe not on the list? We can still, add a project in here, and certainly because we've got a couple of them that are very popular. So let me just ask what questions that you have or comments, folks. You guys are pretty quiet. Okay. Hey, Cameron and Edgar, the project that you had here, which was the create a standard work for 737 inspectors. Are you agreeable for you both working that, because you had a little different rating on that?
I think that we're both on board for choosing that one.
Same here.
Okay. All right. And hey, Dave, on yours, any change from last time what we talked about? You seem to, still pretty high about moving that one forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's high on my list, so definitely want to do that if it's possible.
Okay. Looks like we shouldn't have too much problem, because if what I would like to do, and what we're going to do tonight, again, we're not going to put this into cement, but I want you to think about this. This is going to be, I'm going to send it out after class, and so you have, take a look at what the list has been kind of reduced to from the standpoint of which projects are going forward, and which ones, because any of the students that had, and we had like both nominations, we had several on that. So if we have with students, those students, any nominated projects they had, if they're working on this one, then the other ones come off the plate. So, hey, Jay, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I know you had indicated, wanting, but one of the things that, typically, like I say, the Air Force project or the military projects like you listed are usually very good ones. I know you rated it third. Would you be still comfortable moving forward with that team?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. All right. And Megan, are you on?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay. Are you comfortable then working on the Air Force one as well?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. And okay. For those that I don't have a gray box in here, or one of these in here that have a, indicating blocked out. So that'd be Sam and Nicola. Are you on as well?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay. And I think I mentioned to you that the couple of them, which were training related, and unfortunately Matt, would like for you to kind of think about maybe a fallback. And we really didn't get the chance to talk to you. Do you have any projects that can you talk a little bit more about what you nominated and what you were thinking about for your in your area?
Oh yeah, my first nomination was the one with the HR, the training, and I think I sent you a second one that had more to do with communications.
Okay. And do you have any? Are those and those are those within your own company there, or are you talking about one of the other students' projects?
Those are the ones that I nominated myself the first time, but
Okay.
for the other students, yeah.
Okay. And see, and the ones you had nominated were. Can you refresh me the memory of which ones you had?
I had the one on ISOQ, and I sent the second one on Mass Magnet.
Okay. All right. And let me take a look at see what else we got. Let me check the chat room real quick. Okay. All right. Thanks. I got Sam's input. And what we'll need to do is I wanted to, as I said, mention what we have here and see if there's any other projects. I think what I'm looking at then is that is Ron back on?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Ron. And you had mentioned, I think, second choice then working with Dave on his. Is that still, what's your comfort level with that?
Sure, that's good.
Okay, and I believe your email that you sent that you don't have any other projects that you're currently looking at, that the one you had to scrub?
Yeah, unfortunately, no, I don't.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Let's see. Hey, Larry, are you on?
Yes, sir, I'm on.
Okay. All right. You comfortable working with Dave on his?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. And let's see who we got to talk to. Judith, I got your thing. And let's see. All right. Well, we're starting to shape up here. I think that in finding a home with Nicola of the projects that we have is one of the issues that we have. As I said, we can go to a 4-person team. It would take us down from what we had before, because you can see we're restructuring your initial teams a little bit, not a lot, but making some changes. And so we may end up with just 3 teams, and that's fine as we go through. In fact, it helps somewhat in balancing workload and that type of thing. So let me think about this, take a look at it, because I was just working on this, right? You know, many of you were putting your inputs around 6 o'clock. So I was looking at this, and I'll shoot it back out to you. And once we confirm that your teams, what I'd like for you to do is that revisit your ground rules. You have to maybe change and find out logistically if things will work for you in the teams, if you're going to go to a different combination of students than we're at before. And what I'm going to do then is put out basically reorganize teams, what we have here, and be sure you capture with that. And then I need to know if there's going to be any logistical or administrative issues that you may have, whether it's schedules or the current meeting time that you may have. You'll need to probably renegotiate that a bit with the new members that are coming into the team. And if there's any issues around that, then let's find out what those are. I would like to know by this weekend. So I'm going to, after the class, take a look at the teams and then kind of give you recommendations, set forth. And then we'll start our the next class here with looking at and starting to develop a little bit further these projects that we initially have. So any questions then from where we stand on this? Okay, let me let's bring a couple of things to closure that from this the class we just finished, 501. I'm going to finish up grading. I've done feedback and graded your neighborhood pizza, but I want to talk a little bit about that tonight and have a chance to review some of the lessons learned from that. And then there's the last week's discussion questions going through, and that your feedback about your initial impressions as you're going through. I've got to admit, and I'm sure you probably recoiled in horror for many of the students when you looked at that and said, oh, this thing has now calculated my grade. I'm still looking at something other than an A or a B. And we're just having to work out the nuances and the settings for this new portal, so that until I get the grades in, it doesn't add that 0 in there. It should just be computing with the grades you had to date. Generally, throughout the class, I think many of you kind of struggled with getting things in on time, and for this first class, I've been pretty much leeway in that area in regards to getting in, and many of you that have not been able to upload and it closes you out, there is some mechanisms that have to go through to reopen it back up. And so we're figuring out both on the IT side, the technology side of that, about what's the sweet spot for this to work. But if you are ever late, unable to upload something, then let me know, and then that will be generally we can work through that. It may not be true for the other professors. After this course, you have other professors, and I will tell you there's some variations about that. So be clear and ask them what their policies is if you're, for some reason unable to meet the date of uploading an assignment. So for those that, and I think we've got resolved, I think, most of the issues this last week. So the grading will be polished off, finished up here for this course, and then you should see them hopefully by this weekend. And so we will then use the orientation, by the way, information. So if you haven't filled out a bio, some of you haven't, let me just talk about a couple of administrative things that may be helpful for you to do. Be sure you do post that in the orientation, which was the portal site that we had at the very beginning, because the faculty will go back into that and take a look at your information in the orientation, and so you don't have to continually send who you are and that type of thing. I've noticed also some of you have uppercase, lowercase. Your name may be not the way you want it to look, but you can go back into your profile and correct that. You can change that, but you have to do it yourself, and there's a capability to do that, to change your profile. If you get stuck with that, the best thing is to contact Elaine Moore. She will help you out in knowing how to reset your profile. If your name is, if you don't want Mr. on it or Miss on it, or if you want to, have a lowercase first name or something like that, you want to correct it so you'll have that. And I also recommend that you upload your photos. Sometimes that's helpful. That required, I mean, it's up to you and your privacy, but a lot of times that just kind of puts that personal touch. So One of the other areas that we'll talk about in this upcoming course is looking for a representative from the class. Once we get you into the teams, anybody that would like to be a representative back to NGS about any issues that you may have. So just a few administrative things. So let me, was there any questions about the materials of the courses or where we are up to this point? Oh, okay. And I'll have to close a few things out in order for you to start seeing my screen again. So bear with me for a moment. And by the way, we are going to end on time just because we started late. Doesn't mean we're going to go over time. So that's a good thing. What I'm going to do before we get into our new material and talk about a course is that first of all, let me see. Are you able to see the other slides on your side right now that has the neighborhood pizza case study?
I can't.
Okay.
No.
All right. Should clear up in a second here. Okay. Okay. How about now? Can you see the neighborhood case study?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Yes.
Good. There's a couple of things, let me just say, as we go through the first course. One is getting used to, as we mentioned before, the teams, but also kind of see where you are and use the tools, what your capabilities are, and like doing flow charting, and how would you actually, approach an organization and try to make improvements. That's, one of the desired things that we want to have you do in this course is, one is think about the tools you select, use them properly. And this is going to be a reoccurring theme as we go through everything. We'll be looking at development of that. And overall, you guys did a great job in the neighborhood pizza. One of the things is I'm interested in is what you may have learned from your team as you went and did this exercise. And so I would like to have some maybe feedback from each member of the team that we go through. When you did the neighborhood pizza case study, what was your approach as you went through and did this? Was there agreement within the teams or about the approach? Was it easy, the selection of the tools? What did you think about, what was anything that you may have learned from doing the exercise? And I'm just interested to hearing from each member of a member from each team about what your experience was.
Okay, Professor, did you want to start with our team?
Yeah, would you, yeah, was that Ron?
No, this was Sam.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, Sam. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess after class we set a meet time to come together and discuss the project, and then at that point in time we divvied up the work between the three of us, and then from there we came together a few days later. We shared the work in our shared drive, and then came together a few days later, and once all the work was complete, each person basically briefed their part of the work to the team, and we had each person had constructive feedback that we took into account for the final product. And then once everybody finished briefing, we had one person put the project together, and then with the final edit, send that out for approval. Once everybody gave the okay, then submitted it to the portal.
Okay. And what was the time frame of that? When did you what was the type of schedule that you have? Did you do it like on Saturday or Friday, or what was the?
So we would meet on Saturday after everybody's had a chance to review all the material, and then that would give us an idea of how we would divvy up the work. And then I believe we would meet again once each individual portion was done on Monday night, and then we'd try to get everything finalized on Monday. If there was any additional edits, then it would take till Tuesday, but we'd try to get the project submitted on that Tuesday.
Okay. All right. And that seemed to work well?
Yeah, it did, especially that spreading out the schedule like that. It gave us a chance to head up any personal issues that anyone had. It gave us that extra time to take care of those issues.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Good summary. Let's see. How about Megan or DeCarlo?
For us, we met on Saturdays around 11:30 through Skype, and we just met and we kind of just broke out what each person was going to do, and just equal out the work. And then we decided on Monday that we would send that information to Matthew because he was putting the PowerPoint presentation together. Mm-hmm. And so we sent that to him on Monday. He put it all into it, and then he sent it back out to us to look at. And we also met on Tuesdays at 11:30 to about 12:30 just to discuss if we needed to change anything or if everything looked good, or whatever we needed to speak about before class on Wednesday.
Okay.
And then Matthew, he uploaded it for us into the portal once everybody else was satisfied with it.
All right. And was the team pretty much in agreement about the approach and what we're going to put in there and that type of thing?
Yeah. They were.
Okay, it worked. Okay. Thanks, Megan.
I mean, it worked for us.
Okay. All right. Thanks. And Dave or Jay or Larry?
Professor, this is Larry. We did virtually the same thing. We have scheduled meetings scheduled for, I believe it's Monday evenings and Friday evenings, and we had to meet a little bit more in between that time, but we divvied up the work amongst us three and submitted it as we went along, and then we all gave the thumbs up as to the portion that we all had to own, that everybody was in agreeable, that the content was, that we were all aligned, and then we did the final submission, and I believe Dave handled that portion.
Okay. All right. And you met, what time was it, Monday you said, or is it?
He's got it on our calendar, so let me see. I think it's Monday evening and Friday evening, so we meet twice a week.
Okay.
But for this particular project, just to make sure that all of our deliverables and that we were all aligned from a content perspective, we had to, conversate a little bit more in between that time. So, but that's pretty much our standard time.
Okay. All right. Those are really important. One of the best practices is that teams get into rhythms in that you meet regularly. And over again, NGS students have said just having that rhythm that we get together, prescribed time, and it's really by exception that we don't meet at that time. In other words, unless there's a dire emergency, we really stick to that. And those teams that have that discipline and do it, they seem to be much more successful. So that is clearly a best practice. Cameron or Edgar, on your side? Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
For us, we would just meet up a couple of days out of the week after work. The occasional day at lunch, we'd meet up and work on our homework and discuss the case study.
Okay.
We'd also just decide on meeting up at a place outside of work that would be beneficial to both of us for our schedules. And we just went out, hung out, sat down, read over the case study, and came up with ideas and did the work.
Okay, good. And it worked pretty well for you guys?
Yes.
Okay, good. A couple of things, and thanks for sharing your strategies here. And I put a couple of notes in the when I gave feedback on the ground rules. And one is that though it's not required, there may be at times faculty will ask who had what assignments. And it's always good if you maintain a log of that. In other words, at the conclusion of your meeting when you had your discussions and said, okay, well, you know, Sam's taken this, or Dave's taken that, or Megan's taken this. This is what the task is. And so it allows the faculty to ensure, you know, equity, and then also kind of understanding how do you put together. In our upcoming course, we kind of gone through this as a group, but there usually will be a component then where you do a combination of putting together the slides and do a briefing. And another best practice with that is that you practice it and you time it. If there's amount of time allocated, for instance, when we do your projects brief, your final presentation is going to be about 30 minutes long, an oral brief. So you say, well, wow, that won't be very tough to do. That's not very long. But you're going to be briefing the entire history of your course. And this is kind of an oral thesis for the master's degree. But basically, you're going to be putting together a set of slides that will tell the story of your project from the very beginning all the way through your final recommendations and what results you got. And in this approach is that you have to practice you know, your briefing aspect about this. You know, what are you going to present and how are you going to do it? And and it's always good in the slides is that you have then the written portion. Typically, what you want to put on your slides are the bullets, the main points. For the most part, a lot of things you'll be developing will be visual. It'll be graphical. It'll be you know, charts, flow charts. It'll be use of tools like the Pareto or macro flow charts, etc. And then the other component of that are your briefing notes, and and particularly for Matthew, that would be very important because that's, you know, what his briefing will be, you know, pretty much a written brief in there. But practice that. And a lot of times teams are very hesitant to do that. In other words, oh, I'll just take this slide, I'll take that slide. When you do the briefing, if you're doing a briefing, you should have an integrated story. In other words, you know, this is what my teammate is covering. Here's what, you know, Mikalo is going to cover with you later. And so it's an integrated briefing, partly because we want you to understand the material. And a lot of people, if you know anything about Myers-Briggs or the personality type, you're wired differently. And some people actually learn better when they're able to talk things out, and other people are wired where, you know, they need some quiet time. You know, they need to think about things, and other people are kind of extrovert, needs to be able to talk things out to understand it. So we want to be able to ensure that, you know, your learning styles are accommodated as well. And a lot of times the students do learn when they have to put the briefing together. So if it's a 15-minute brief that you're going to have, I do recommend that you actually kind of run through that and listen to each other and be, you know, high performing and give, you know, good feedback. You know, constructive criticism is the breakfast of champions, and so you know, practice that. That you give that and you actually listen to each other's parts, so you kind of know and you can chip into that. The other best practice, I think I mentioned to you before, is that on all assignments is help your fellow students out. You know, even before you begin, just take a step back and say, oh, this is what we're supposed to do. This is the charts we're supposed to submit and when we're supposed to submit them. And it's good to have that discussion amongst your team fairly early on, so that if you need to go back to me and get clarification of what you're supposed to do, or any of the faculty, or if you need to review the syllabus again or go back and review maybe the recording, is that we want to be sure that you have the requirements clear before you wait until you start to attempt to do that. And so sometimes that occurs. So just, we talk about best practices and such. All right. What I would like to do if the team that we got at Excelsior, we got the neighborhood pizza case study. I want to talk a little bit more, not just about the process used, but also the content of how you approach that. First, just kind of summarize. Can somebody just tell me in a nutshell, how would you describe the neighborhood pizza place? And what I want you to do, well, just somebody take a shot at it first. What's the neighborhood pizza? If you describe that organization to somebody else, what would you do?
Hi, this is Ron. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Ron.
Okay, I'll take a stab at it. So basically, if I was just explaining this to somebody, it sounds like it was just kind of a mom and pop pizza shop that just kind of started. So it was these people who had a knack of making pizza. They opened up a small store at a strip mall, and they became very successful at it. As the success came, the orders started rolling in, and it sounds like they were kind of like the apex of, you know, failing and not keeping up with it. So that's kind of like the overall summary, what I kind of caught out of it.
Okay. Hey, that sounds pretty about right. Anybody else like to add something into what Ron's description was? How about the performance level? How are they doing? Were they doing successful, or are they needing to improve? What were some of the key issues in the case study? Do you remember?
This is Larry. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Larry.
If I remember correctly, the quality of the pizza itself got very good reviews, but I think it was the delivery times that was very challenging, and that's where they were having some issues.
Okay. Yeah. They were, getting some bad Yelp ratings, feedback in that area, and so they're doing that. All right. And who else was trying to jump in there? Was that Megan, Judith, DeColo? I'm sorry.
I think that yes, they get good reviews on Yelp for the quality of their pizza, but many comments were also that they were more expensive than the competition.
Yeah.
So
right.
I think that can go both ways, either positive or negative. Right.
Yeah, and they'll try to, so that's, small business, clearly was, and they certainly had competition. Like your place, there's like 10 pizza places within driving distance. Okay, well, good. Not a bad job. Now, who are their customers? Who do you suppose, did the case study say anything about who their customers are?
They were made to order pizza.
Okay. People
provided
who
delivery and take out.
Okay. Takeout and delivery. No dine-in, right?
No.
Okay. So what else do you think could you hypothesize about their customer base?
This sad girl. I would say probably medium income, since the pizza is getting more expensive and they're getting good reviews. So probably, I'd say maybe 20s on to maybe 30s.
Okay. So yeah, and so a large part of their customer base was tech savvy or so. All right. Yeah, and there's probably other things you could maybe think about. You know, are there individuals, or are they also providing groups? You know, do they do, you know, churches or school type of things? Maybe that's an impact on there. Are they doing lunch? Are they doing, you know, service that where the dynamics are maybe different? But the point is, in describing an organization, I want you to kind of think about this, because when you set into your teams, once we finalize these teams, one of the things I would like for you to do is that gather around the phone or Skype, whatever you're using, and share a description of the organization. And if you think about an overview, you'll ask some questions. I'm going to highlight again, I'm going to pick on one team here that I thought provided some really good context. But one of the things that's helpful is that you use a systematic approach to understand the organization. So you ask questions like, well, who's the customer of this particular product or service? You know, what are their requirements? Are they different types of customers that are using this, you know, product item, whatever we're focused in on? Well, who's the customers of this organization? What's their performance level? You know, for instance, what are the key indicators that they're using that may be important? You know, are they financially doing well? Are they ones that have high levels of customer satisfaction based on that groups that we talked about? Are they financially sound? So you're starting to do this. Are they a large organization, or are they a mom and pop operation? Because the dynamics are so different about how you approach in the consulting of that. If you try to implement a lot of the, you know, things that like a balanced scorecard perhaps, or a lot of things that require resources and other capabilities, in a small or medium, you know, or micro organization like this one, you need to be able to understand how to tailor your approach to that, to them. So what's the workforce look like? You know, what was the composition of the people that they have? How many full-time, and, you know, were they high school students that, you know, change over every couple of months? So that gives you dynamics. And so it's a systematic approach to discussing an organization. A couple of things that I might point you towards whenever you do things is that in the Baldrige criteria, which we talked about in core values and you know, using it as a systems approach, there's a portion that we did not talk about. If you open up the criteria, there's a thing called the organizational overview. And what it does, it asks the organization to document who they are. It's like a resume. So it tells you the size of the organization, the nature of the workforce, what are their organizational challenges, who are their customer base, all the things we just talked about. And it is in there because it allows the examiners to understand the context of how they are implementing their quality and understand, like in a smaller organizations, things will probably be more informal. In a larger organization, we'll probably have more documented capabilities and processes and flow charts. Whereas a smaller organization, you know, when you do strategic planning, you know, and you can run down the hall and says, here's the plan, that's their deployment, right? And so that may be appropriate for them. And so understanding what is appropriate. And many of you work in very large organizations in a particular field, and some of you don't. Some of you work in other places that have different size characteristics. So be careful of your paradigm that you have about, and particularly if you're internal consultant, about what you know about the organization. So I suggest whenever you do any organization, if there's any other case studies you have, is just be sure you as a team have clarity about who they are and where you're going to go. And it's going to be very helpful, I think, your project to ask these questions. What's the workforce like? Are they highly educated? Are they sufficient? What's your challenges, et cetera? And as I mentioned, if you open up the criteria book, since you spend a few bucks on that, you'll find in your organizational overview some questions or the type of things that organizations are asked on. So I'm going to switch over to the Team Excelsior, if you will. I'm going to ask you to go through your presentation a little bit. Here's your flow chart, right? Did you debate at all what type of flow chart you wanted to use? Whether you're going to use like a functional flow chart or a swim lane flow chart or anything like that?
Hi, Professor Tron. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
So basically what we did is we had everybody, before we met and combined the whole presentation, we had everybody kind of submit their interpretation or their idea for the flow chart. So the idea was like everybody would individually just kind of have their own draft, and then we would combine them all and get the best, pick and choose the best parts of all of our flow charts. So it turned out, this was the final draft, which incorporated some, everybody's ideas and whatever, picked and choose the best of the best.
Okay. Yeah, and that was for the, because you had to do that. You had to, see whatever your common experience was. I don't know if any of you, worked at Domino's or local pizza and, see how it actually does, but some of you may have to imagine this, so it's innovative. Let me ask, it may not necessarily be the team here, but how, if you were the consultant team called into the neighborhood pizza, you were the guys that maybe, you went there and this is your favorite pizza place, and the owner shared with you their struggles, or maybe somebody is working there and they shared it, and you've been called in. How would you develop a flow chart? What would be the approach? Instead of here brainstorming with your team members, what would be your approach to developing that flow chart? Any ideas how you would do that?
You could watch their
Observing how they
process.
do it.
Hello? Hello?
Hey, Jay, let's start with you, and then we'll swing back around.
Yeah, this is Jay. You could watch their process to see how they do things.
Okay. So you could observe it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sit there and get one of those, 16-ounce Cokes and, a couple of slices of your favorite pizza, sit in the corner and watch it, right? All right. That's one way. What's another way you may be able to do that?
Time the process besides watching it. If they have a timing issue, try to see how the time goes with the workflow.
Okay. So all right. So watching them, and then you jump on your Visio or your PowerPoint, and then do the chart. Is that what you would think, or? Okay. Those are techniques.
Ask questions.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have a technique that they might be able to do to develop this flow chart?
What I've done in the past is just kind of use the power of sticky notes and a big wall, and
There you go.
so I kind of just set everybody who's in the know, who kind of knows their process, and just kind of say, hey, let's just put sticky notes of what you guys do, kind of like start telling the story. I kind of limit them to each sticky note just have a verb noun, so you're either getting ingredients or baking, making sauce or anything like that. So we start doing these sticky pads against the wall, and then we started putting them in order, and then you can these kind of flow charts appear slowly.
Anybody else tried Ron's technique?
Yeah, I've tried it before in the past.
Yeah. Cameron, that was you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How did it turn out?
Well, like he said, it kind of creates the process itself, getting input and seeing, like he said, one statement of, pizza being baked or whatever, and then you kind of just put it all together, and it literally almost creates itself.
Yeah. And what's the advantages of doing the various ways that, if you start thinking about it, one of the things that we'll talk a little bit more is that you really want to start to capture whenever you do your flow charting. And the two, if you look at the methods, you can do it, where you basically do it notional, or you do it through observation where you sit there and look at it. If you engage the workforce in it and use it like a sticky approach where you take that and says, okay, what's the first step you do, when the order comes in? What happens? How's it come in? It comes in by email, by phone. We got text messages. We've got walk-ins. Okay. So you got all these things. Why? You got different start points, right? Because the start point from the customer's view may be different from my age. And then what happens after that? And it's amazing in that technique. One, you find out actually how they're actually doing it, right? And you find out whether there's differences between shifts, about their approaches, and there may be different techniques that are being used. But observation, direct observation, and then also having the ability to engage, where you actually have them talk about it. And it's often a learning experience for them as well. In other words, when you're developing this, they say, no, I do it this way. Oh, you guys do it this way. Oh, okay. We do it at lunchtime this way, but we change it up when we're really busy at dinner time because we have to do this, and this. The idea is that as you use the tools, you want to think about the human element, engaging their opinions and getting the accuracy. So even if you, and a lot of times organizations may even have a flow chart, a process already in place. And so I want you to challenge that when you get into your MVPs, is this the way you actually do it, or is it the way they're supposed to be doing it? Okay, there's a difference often between what they're supposed to be doing, or what a SOP or a manual says, or versus actuality. And for those organizations that do audits and ensure there's compliance and really follow kind of like an ISO methodology, there may not be that variation, but for most part, a lot of times you want to be sure whatever the flow chart is that you captured it and validated it. So one of the first things, after you develop a flow chart like this, is going back to the crew. Even if when you draft it, maybe you looked at it through observation, you want to go back and say, do we have this about right? Is this, and have them talk it through, because you want to get the ownership into it. So you got a great flow. You got the first symbology, the round symbols that indicate start and end time. So be sure that that'll be an important theme. And one of the things is then after you get your flow chart is that you're going to use it in a lot of different ways. But we're not going to go into a lot of detail tonight with that. I just want to talk at a high level around that and techniques and how you use this. And as you indicated here, well, we can start to identify wait times, for instance. You can start looking at this, and this becomes your battle map, this flow chart. And you start to say, where in this process can things be wrong? So you want it to be about right. And you want to be sure before you start making assumptions about where the risks are in this and what the steps that are taking an extra long amount of time. Is there variation in that? And so you're going to start using this thing as really where are the areas we want to collect data, where there's a lot of rework and that type of thing. And then that was this kind of the question: how would you use this flow chart and to start taking a look at a lot of different things? And some of you had extensive amount of questions about the data you're going to collect. And that's appropriate, because part of this then in the define phase is, here's the scope of our project, and you can look at it and say, okay, here's from the start point to the end point. This is where we're going to start to measure stuff. And then you're going to go through and you start thinking about all the areas that you want to collect some data. And so that is really kind of the same technique that we're going to emulate in your MVPs as we go through the using the MEG process. And And so this is what the Team Excelsior is kind of thinking about, looking at the wait times, process points that can benefit from pre-work. So you started thinking about potential solutions along with collecting some data and evaluating that. This is, I mentioned, I think, to a couple of you, sometimes you develop hypotheses about what things are, screwed up. What are the things that are causing delays? And you start to look at that, and then that starts you thinking about how am I going to collect data to figure out whether, there may be a problem with staffing. For instance, if they got a lot of high schoolers that come in, they're not well trained and that type of thing. Look at understaffed and properly trained, and you start to going through that approach. So you did a good job. Team Excelsior, did you have anything in here that you wanted to add? We're going to build on this this idea of what do we need to look at as we go through it later on. But one of the things that what was did you have any ahas, Team Excelsior, when you went through and did your neighborhood pizza, when you laid out the core values here? What did you gain by doing that, by adding this? Ron, Sam, or Judith?
This is Sam. I think we had a hard time initially figuring out, not necessarily the missing values. I think it was pretty evident they were missing some pretty serious values when it came to their operations. But when it came to defining the values that they were exhibiting, I think, we even had a little bit of a disagreement as far as what we felt they were showing, because we felt like they really weren't exemplifying any of the values strongly. I had to dig deep to find. That was my particular piece of the pie, was to outline the values, and we really had to dig deep to find the values that they were showing. And the values that I selected, they weren't even 100%. I would say they were between 30 to 50% of the value they had, and the rest was missed. So.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Sam. Well, one of the things when it struck me when I read this is that sometimes you overlook things, and sometimes by using the values in an operational way, you start thinking about that through that lens and saying, are things connected well? Is the delivery the order taker on the same sheet of music with the folks who are making the pizzas? Are they over-promising to the if they take the order and they know they got way too much pizzas to make, do they tell the customer anything? In other words, is there a systems view where information's flowing back and forth in the organization? How are they focused on the customer? Who are their customers and what are the requirements and how may they be different? So that's one area in that. And so you start to use these things like valuing their people, which is really about evaluating their workforce. Are they motivating them? Are they training them? Are they getting ideas from them how to shorten their time? How are they treating the workforce? How are they planning for competitors? Are they focused on just coming in to work and getting the pizzas out every day? Or the two, the mom and pop thinking about what's happened to their competitive landscape? Have they been looking at the competitors and seeing whether or not there's changes they may have to make on price or quality because they're losing customers, that type of thing. So I thought it was a very good kind of approach, and I want you to dig deep, like Sam said, think about these things, because again, they will be also true for your MVP. Is there a systems focus? What is their customers? How well is the workforce? The things we talked about as well. You can start to take a look at that and evaluate that. And then I'm not going to dwell too much more because I want to jump over to the other set of things we're going to cover tonight. But basically, the other different tools, you laid them out, whether they're appropriate. And one of the things that may be interesting in context, for a very small organization to adapt or do like a Baldrige type of approach. Well, they first probably would have to be educated. They have to have some type of training on that. And unless you're going to do it for them, for the price of pizza, being able to do that is a very practical situation. What are the resources they have? So ensuring your recommendations are tailored to the organization is one of the things that will be always kind of a theme. If you're in the military, you have structures and systems, and they don't. It's much more difficult to implement some systems that not currently are in their structure. And same thing will be true for the other organizations. And kind of knowing that, what can you influence as change agents in a pizza place, you can change a lot. You can influence a lot of the processes and what they measure. You can even how they treat their suppliers because it's under their control. In other organizations, they don't belong to them. They belong to a planning cell. They belong to an HR department, and so understanding the context is just the takeaway. And then we talked already about some of the things you learned in here, but I wanted just to kind of pick on you guys. Thanks, Excelsior, to bring out some of the comments in here, and really to prepare you also for your MVPs and about the questions and things that you will be having that may be similar to this case study. All right. Well, I'm transitioning over to tonight's discussion about our upcoming course. Any other comments about the neighborhood pizza? What did you think of the case study itself? Anything that you may have learned, from the team that we haven't discussed? Anybody want to share anything on that? Okay. Well, let's see. I'm trying to show my the syllabus that we have upcoming, and I'll wait for a second. Oh, I have to close a few things out again. GoToMeeting is not my friend tonight. Okay, let me transition a little bit, and we'll start with the this course that we have, and this is going to be a little different at the end than we have before. Here's the syllabus. It's going to be mainly focused on your projects. This course has some instruction that we'll go through, and it's about a week shorter than the one we have out. Typically, your courses are going to be 5 weeks, where you have kind of a similar type of things for your normal courses, but the Master Business Process of courses is that we're going to have some instruction, and then what I'm going to do is meet with you as a team later on as we get into the initial course material. We'll talk about problem statements, customer requirements, matrices, some macro flow charts, and basically look at force field analysis, which is kind of like a low-level risk analysis in this course. And after we go through a high-level discussion of that, is that we're going to have you, as a team, develop those charts and start developing them on your MVP. And instead of kind of having a presentation here, which is difficult to have a lot of discussion, as you notice, there's a lot of quiet time when I turn it back over to you, is that we'll set up the time where we'll meet in an individual with you as a team, and then talk about the particulars of your project and how these deliverables about the customer requirements, macro flowchart, and those type of things that you develop pertain to that one. And as I mentioned before, if we have a small number of teams, we can all do it on Wednesday night. But if there's a schedule that works a little better, like the call, I know you're up here, dark 30. If we can maybe work out something with your team that's more convenient, or any of you that works better for our schedules, we have that capability. Some of you, that's your dedicated time on Wednesdays. You got everything else going on the rest of the week. But there'll be some flex typically when we do the mentoring sessions. So we'll have some large sessions here, give you some course material, and then I'm going to go back to and have our mentoring session, and that'll be your the final sessions you'll have will be individual ones with us. There's a couple of things let me just talk about the deliverables. One is that we're going to continue to work the selection of the project. Even if we have a tentative one, we're going to have to get some information back from the champion, be sure they're good with supporting the project, and that we have met all the initial requirements for this project from the standpoint of the school, and that so we're going to continue that discussion, and these are tentative, and I want you as a team then, as we put together, is think about the fallback project, and maybe your second or third choice, or one that, but it'll be one you each as a team would have. So I'm looking at a primary and a fallback for each one of the teams. And so sometimes by comparing maybe to another alternate project that you may have, that another team have, you say, well, which one's better, which one this? It just strengthens your argument for whichever project that you want to proceed, or perhaps, and you never know, just like the two students we had, that, hey, we initially had we thought it was a pretty good project, but until we started asking around or finding the operational need, that might change. So we're trying to flesh that out as much as we can here at the beginning. So we're going to also then, once we establish teams and you maybe revisit your team names, be sure you're comfortable with it in the project, is that we'll have you set up what's called a tracker. It is basically a database, a repository for your projects. And you'll have access to this tracker for your team. And so typically one member out of your team uploads documents into this tracker, and it will be basically where you add your slides as you go through the courses. It'll be where you park things in there that will be a historical document for your project, and it'll be the ones that you will continue to build upon in developing your story of your project. So by the time we get through this course, is that you'll contact the IT department, and then you set up an account, and in the tracker you put your projects, and you then also have access to all the other NGS projects, so you can see what other students have done and take a look at. Perhaps there's some very good in there, some are excellent, some are A student type of quality work, and I'll tell you there are some that they passed, but may not be as good as some of the others. And so having seen the diversity of that sometimes is helpful for students. In addition to this, then we're going to be developing some deliverables here. The problem statement is going to be one of them. Is then we're going to have a force field analysis. We'll be looking at developing a SciPoc, which is a very high systems level view of the project, and we'll develop a high level macro flow chart. You don't have to do a detailed one, but basically it's for scoping purposes. And we'll talk more about that. That it should be probably 5 or 6 steps, large steps that says, okay, here's what the project we're looking at. Here's the process that we are looking at and where it is in the organization. It'll be a visual on that. So in addition to that is that the question we have, who's the customers of this project? What are their requirements? And how well later on, in that discussion, are they delivering on that? And so a CRM is what we call that. And that'll be one of the other things you'll be developing along with force field analysis problem statement. We'll talk a little bit more about alignment to strategic priorities, but you have a strategic planning class coming up, and it'll be covered a little bit more strongly with that. But basically, whether or not these projects are aligned to important aspects of the organization, and do they fit into the champion's priorities is one of the things we'll talk about. So when we go in and fill out the tracker, in addition to putting parking slides in there, there is some information we want to be able to collect, such as who are the champions of the organization, who are the ones sponsoring this, what's the a little bit of organizational description, and then the team information will also be in there. So as we go through this, we're going to talk a little bit about the problem statement. I'll cover up some of that tonight and talk about these the other deliverables as we go through. And we're going to spend a lot of time in be sure you get your problem statement about right. That is foundational to a successful project. And for those who have gone through the black belt and been familiar with this, almost all projects start with this. But basically, it is describes what you're trying to work on. It's a business case that's part of it as well, and it's a real art to writing a good problem statement. But it really is then what you will, at the end of the course, go back and say, okay, this is what we accomplished. We fixed this problem. we fixed this this process. This is something that we're going to focus in on, and that you will continually come back to in regards to what you're working on. And over the time of the year, teams have a tendency to drift a bit. You find something else. Hey, this is really interesting, or the champion would like us to work on this. But the problem statement basically is what you have to ensure you keep coming back and provide focus on. And we'll talk about that dynamic and how we start to look at that. We'll cover some of that tonight, as I mentioned, and then we'll cover these other tools. So what's going to happen is basically you're going to put together a presentation as we develop the tools, as we go through the instructional material, and then you'll add it in. And so our last sessions is that we'll go through and look at all these things in conjunction with each other. We'll look at your problem statement. We'll look at your macro flow chart. We'll look at who your champions are. We'll look at force field analysis, and look at them in context of each other. It's not only how you use each one of these tools, but really how you see them together. And then we're going to be on your MVPs. So we're going to be using the transitioning from case studies over to the real world in this project. This is, and there's further information. You can take a look at that. It'll be in the floor. It'll be discussion questions, very similar to what we had before for you to answer. And then basically the deliverables I just covered will be the primary team product. Your deliverable for this one is going to be primarily, except for the discussion questions, team-related projects, team-related deliverables. So, any questions about the syllabus or anything in regards to that? Okay. Let me go through a high level, and I'm not going to spend too much time. And by the way, as I mentioned, there's an older set of slides. My faculty side appear to be with these, the correct ones. And then I just happened to see, I guess it looked like it may have had an older set that may have been in there that talked about the school and a lot of the intro things we have in there. So again, we have some new folks in the academic affairs and also a new system rolling out, so I do apologize for that. But let me talk briefly to the slides. Let me transition real quick to that and cover some key things in here. I'm not going to spend too much more on. We talked about what the selection of a project will be. We've already started to scope this thing down. If there's any issues that we will need to find, particularly that are sensitive in nature, regulatory, like what you may have bumped up in, like what Matthew did, that the local folks may be, fine with it, but maybe somebody at the higher headquarters isn't so fine with this project, having other people involved with that. So we're going to be sure we do that. We talked about, what makes good projects, and by the way, all teams in NGS and all teams almost that do these things, you're going to collect data. And what we mean by historical data, it's good that while you're working on an existing process that, and it may be the historical data that we're talking about really is the documented data, the data that's in reports or there are databases that you as a team can access. It will allow us to take a look at information that is documented already. But almost all teams will go through a data collection process. There will be qualitative data for the most part that you don't have that you will need to collect, such as interviewing people that are involved with this process, or focus groups or surveys that get the qualitative data, or you find that there's either insufficient data or gaps in what you have. And so it's not a disqualifier if you don't have, all of the data, you just go out and kind of find it like gold nuggets. It's something that will be, you're going to be doing data collection, but we don't want to basically start with a, set of requirements and design a new process. That's not what we're going to be focused on. And so we talked about some of the pros things. We talked about problems before. Here's the problem statement, and this is a little bit what I'm going to give you some context with. Is, as I mentioned, the problem statement where it defines, in addition to what the problem is, what the business case is. And that is, how long has this been going on? What's the impact to the bottom line? Is it causing dissatisfaction? Is it cost related? Is it something that is impacting timeliness? What is the issue? And that's what the problem statement, when you read it, you should have a pretty good idea what that is. It's not just us, not just the student that's the sponsor. It's a dialogue developed through a discussion with the champion. What's success look like? What's your view, of the problem? And it's also then, in addition to discussion with the champion and asking the right questions, is that typically it goes through iterations. In other words, the problem statement isn't something, in my experience, is that you just write and leave alone. Is that as you start to go through this process, you start to get more information about what the problem is, and these things, particularly when you start collecting it in the measure phase, gets modified a bit. And so that's normal. So, and that's probably be expected that you'll modify these things and to get it about right, because we'll talk about the scope of the organization, which you're going to be working on. And the other thing is that you guys need to agree to it. The champion needs to give you input, and you need, as each one of you, understand it in the same way. So there's that element. And it provides scope. In other words, problem statement tells you basically what I've included. Your macro flow chart is going to show that more graphically about what's going to be included in your project, what's going to be excluded. So sometimes that's important. Also, the other things that we'll talk about is that you'll ask questions of the champion, like, is this a zero-sum game? In other words, do we have leeway to come up with solutions that cost money? If so, is there a dollar limit? Is there anything that's off limits that we can't look at? Maybe there's something that suppliers are working on or contractors are working on that they don't want you messing with. So it's defining what's in the scope of the project. And later on, you'll do a charter and define that. But here we're just kind of identifying the issues in this course. And really defines the value proposition. These are sometimes good things to think about when you look at problem statements, is that what is happening? And you describe that in terms of, is there a goal or a standard that's maybe being violated? Like Dave, indicated, a percentage of, how much they're missing the target. That's an excellent way to start talking about what's the problem. So you're going to be, if you go in there and say, well, we got a lot more work than we had to before. Yeah, not so much. What we need to do is say, ask, is there particular standards the organization has to measure where this is being violated? Is there any particular goals or regulatory requirements that they need to do? Sometimes in the military, it's we're not meeting a readiness rate. Okay, we don't have availability of these aircraft when we need it, and it's being exceeded by X amount. But that's another example of that. You have to have quantifiable indicators in your problem statement. In other words, it's at this level, and then we can measure it at the end how much we moved it. So you're going to have numbers that talk about what is the degree of the problem. Again, we'll give you some illustrations of that a little bit later. How long has it been going on? Has this been something that is within the last week, 6 months, 6 years? What's the nature of this? And what it allows you to think about is this, again, a problem solving? In other words, something that maybe just arrives, maybe it's not a recurring, maybe it's just normal variation in a process. In other words, is something happened, somebody went on leave, something fell through the cracks, and somebody wants to put a team to go improve it. Well, that tells us a little bit, how long has this been going on, and it also provides a little bit about a trajectory about, well, if we don't fix it, is it going to continually get worse? Is this problem been pretty much status quo? In other words, it's it's something that's been impacting on them, but it's not growing or it's not getting worse. It's just an annoyance. Or is it something, if we don't fix, it's going to really impact the organization? So the other part of this is, where is this occurring? Is it within one shop, one area, one company site geographically? So these are things that will be included in your problem statement when you write up the description. And as we talk about, and how big is this problem? Is it $100,000 worth of a problem? Is it 25% of our stock is being wasted? So, how big is this thing? And that are just descriptors we want to do. So think about this, because that's when we start to do. And typically, this introduces the concept of key business drivers. And if you looked at the GIMBA one, they talked about what are the key metrics that you have to look at. And typically in our projects that we do, it'll be one of these in regards to what you're going to be looking at in your problem statement, and that is this mainly a cost problem? Is this something that's causing us to hemorrhage money, resources? We need to reduce our costs. Maybe it's budget overruns, that type of thing. Could be time, not meeting deadlines. It takes too long to get something done. We get it done, but it takes us forever. And the third triad is maybe it's quality. We're doing it on time. It doesn't cost us that much, but we're spending a lot of time in rework or scrap. Get a lot of warranty claims. And this is much more so in project management, and we'll call this the iron triangle: cost, quality, and time. Basically, you're managing these things as a project manager. But in your problem statement, one of these of the three, or maybe a couple of the three, may be more important for success than the others. Yeah, we can get that defect rate down to Six Sigma, which is almost nothing. However, it'll send us our costs through the roof. Okay, so what does success look like? Then, and it's kind of asking the same question we asked before, like in St. Luke. What does success look like? Are they trying to just reduce costs, and they don't care about the impact on the patient? That they get more accountable, and then the billing takes too long. I mean, accountability is great, but maybe it just takes too long, and then the patient gets to the bill a year later and they're steaming because they hadn't planned for it. So there's an amazing amount of information that you need to think about, but it is typically one of these may be the most important one in that. And and we'll talk about in your projects what are the predominant driver, what success look like, and be sure there's agreement on that, because sometimes there's trade-offs that you'll have between the three. All right, take a look. I want you to just briefly kind of read through this list of 4 problem statements here. What do you think are some of the problems here with the problem statement in regards to how they're written? What do you think's wrong with the first one? And I'm so get ready to jump in here and help me out. Need to reduce the redundancies in the number of reports done so that overtime costs can be saved. Is that a good problem statement? Of course it isn't. We'll give you the clue, but why isn't it a good one?
Professor, excuse me. I'm not sure if anybody else is having this trouble, but I'm not seeing anything on the. I'm just seeing
same issue.
a slide.
Are you kidding me? Kidding me?
No, I'm still under review of MPP status.
Hold on. Is it still stuck on the, what are you seeing on your side, by the way?
It's good now.
Now.
Okay. You see an example of have you seen this, these other slides we covered?
Now they're showing up.
Okay, all right. Hey, Ron, thanks. I'm just driving along here, and without everybody's on the same car. We're not even on the same road. Okay. Yeah. For some reason, I don't know. It seems to be sticking tonight. Log in and then just switching over. But here's the slides I was talking about. It's part of the set we sent, and then problem statements. What we have then basically in here is that, can you see the slides up here, example of 4 problem statements?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just talk about this. How about the first one? What do you think? What's the, is this good or a bad one here?
A bad one, it's not quantifiable. There's nothing, I mean.
Yeah, right. Reduce redundancies in the number of reports done so that can save overtime costs. Yeah, there's no numbers in that. It has to have a number in there. How about some of the other characteristics that we talked about in regards to what, when, where, and magnitude? Does it have discussion about where it's happening in the organization or how long has it been going on?
No.
Okay.
Just.
Okay. Anybody else? Then let's take a look at the second one there. How would you, at the end of the project, measure customers' happiness? Anybody want to take a shot?
Do surveys.
Sending customers an MFA.
Yeah. Okay, it could be. Could be a survey. It could be on 1 to 5 scale. But one of the things that, again, as a measure, is that there's so many things that contribute to happy. You know, is it not happy with the processing time of the claims? What's been the feedback on that? What's the survey? What's the validity of the survey? A lot of things that kind of go into it. We generally would focus in on, well, let's look at improving the processing time. How long does that currently take? Is there a standard that is necessary that would make the, you know, predictive of customer satisfaction? So you would need to add those other indicators in there that will allow us to basically to measure that. And so you really would probably focus on, if the key metric on that, not happy with processing time, what would be the key metric, key driver in there? Would it be time, quality, or cost? Yeah.
I'd say the steps in the process.
Yeah, so you would focus on, clearly on time as being an important one. And what's the key metric on the third one? Cost overrun projects may result in reduction of staff starting in second quarter 2013.
Cost.
Cost. Okay. Anybody have a different opinion? We actually one of the teams when they first started, and they talked with us, because these are, you know, kind of actually some examples that some teams in the past actually started with. One of the things that they talked about was that the real motivation of this and the real outcome was not to lose staff. Okay, that was success. I mean, it's what the champion said, is that I want to keep my people, basically. All right, and we've got cost overruns, which I don't think are in my control, and I don't want to lose my people. That was actually what the success criteria that the champion was important. That, you know, whatever they came up with is that he wanted to have that number down so it wouldn't look bad. And his success factor was that I don't have to lay anybody off. And so one of the things is, you know, the team then started to ask, is there a correlation, you know, what will cause that? What's the importance of, you know, that budget? Is there like 10 people going to be laid off? There's going to be 5 going to be laid off? What's the scope of this? But his success factor was, even if they got the cost down and he still left people, he'd still be upset. It didn't seem logical at all, but that was actually one of the things the team ran into. So be sure that you need to ask these questions of the champion. You know, what's most important to you? Cost, quality, time. You know, if we did it this way and this result, you know, didn't change, is that still going to be success? And so be sure to ask the questions. How about the fourth one? Is this a good focus? And what's your opinion about that?
This is Sam. I don't think it's a good focus because you're looking at the employee motivation or happiness, which is causing their work quality to be poor.
Yeah. How about the workforce is not motivated or well organized, or organized it? Organized it. Okay. And this is one of the traps that sometimes teams get into, is that we want to fix the workforce, right? People aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. They should be doing it, but they're not. And workforce is not motivated or well organized, okay, is then we really want to focus on the process about how we can improve what they're working on as opposed to trying to fix people. And the real issue isn't whether the performance measures existed or not. It was whether or not the employees were doing the work and that they had measures that would demonstrate those results. So developing performance metrics and saying, okay, well, this is going to motivate the workforce. Those two things were kind of hard to correlate. So they ended up refocusing this project more on processes and what do we need to measure around productivity and throughput and, you know, cost, quality, and time. And so that's how this became kind of a jujitsu, where you turn this kind of a really poor one in, but you keep coming back to the cost, quality, and time descriptions, and it will help you take things like this and make it into something that we can measure. And you know, how the workforce better organized or how they better motivated. Those really weren't issues that the team wanted to tackle. Really, it was the other aspect of improving things that you can quantify. Okay, and you can take a look at the numerous complaints and resulting, you know, late, and so it wasn't specific enough. A lot of times we kind of start with these type of things, and then you get a lot more specific about what we're going to focus in on where it's going to be. Room service is consistently late. Is it late in, you know, every room? Is it, you know, late night? Is it after the restaurant closes and there's, you know, the night shift on? Numerous complaints by whom and on what type of food, perhaps. And so we can get a little bit more specific. These are very general. I'm going to stop here tonight because to go on a little bit further, one, I want to kind of do this when you're fresh, and I think I'm going to do it. We'll start again with next week, but I wanted to just expose you to the problem statements and start thinking about that, because what we will do then, when you start to think about the teams that you may be formed in, I want you to start thinking about the projects that you're going to be involved with in regards to these questions of what is the problem, where is it located, in developing that problem statement that we will have for you in regards to the MVPs, the tentative teams. So at this point, I'm going to hold on to the rest of the material. We'll come back. We'll cover it easily next week. We're going to cover into some of the other aspects of CRM, flowcharts, and have you start to work on that. Other comments or questions that we have from tonight's materials? Okay. If not, then there will be then, and we'll cover the material. I'll send you out again the MVPs, the proposed ones that we have with proposed teams. For those that we haven't landed on a team solidly yet, if you got any concerns or issues, let's get these resolved. I would like to have you all onto a team and you know, with a pretty good alternatives by this next week. Then we can kind of get started in regards to moving forward. So if there's no issues with the teams, then I'm going to be able to put you together and start working on through these assignments. And one of the things that in your tentative teams that we've got here, I'll send you out some information about. You go ahead and take a look at problem statements, start having that discussion about what might be a problem statement for your organization for this team. And there may be some students contacting other teams about joining your current team that you have, because as I get information from the students, from each one of you, you know, about preferences, there may be some of you say, okay, I would like to maybe look at this other team and get a little bit more information about that. That's typically what happens as well this first week, and then we'll get your heads focusing on the MVPs. So, and hopefully we get this technology straightened out. There's been kind of a perfect storm here with some things in the portal and GoToMeeting and then the slides. So I want to get these things corrected and hopefully have a lot smoother sailing from here on out. So I'll hang on. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you taking the time this evening, and particularly wait for the time that we were able to get back live. And wish you all a good evening.
Good night.
Good night.